So, after 20 years of waiting, I was finally able to watch the Gundam Seed Freedom movie. And even more surprisingly, they actually showed it in a movie theater that was relatively close to me. Sure, I still had to travel a little over 2 hours to get there, I had to venture into the French speaking part of Belgium, and the movie did only have French subtitles, but you gotta make sacrifices. After all, the movie was killing it in Japanese box offices, so surely this had to be one hell of a movie to totally validate my travel time to get there, and the fact that I would be watching a movie that was spoken in a foreign language and subtitled in a foreign language. Right? Well, let's just start by saying that there was a very big difference between the people online, who were absolutely loving the movie, the people I was with, who ended up absolutely hating the movie, and then me, who was just like, yeah, this is almost exactly what I was expecting the movie to be. So I think this might actually be one of the most important factors for your enjoyment if you're going to be watching Gundam Seed Freedom. I did not go into this movie expecting a masterpiece that was like fine-tuned and crafted over the course of 20 years. Based on the trailers we got, I was expecting a cash grab with something resembling a story, Takanori Nishikawa, and of course, NTR. And what I got was a surprisingly charming movie that really felt like it was made for the fans, which also had an amazing soundtrack, and of course, NTR. So let's start with the good without getting into major spoiler territory. Just like the trailers led us to believe, Kira is going through some issues in the first half of the movie, and I think they actually handled it really well. So, in late Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny, Kira became this almighty, unstoppable force of nature. And while there are ways to turn this into a compelling story, Gundam Seed Destiny did not go this route at all. There were some throwaway scenes where Kira was wondering if he was doing the right thing, but at the end of the day, they were always doing the right thing because they were the good guys. And then Gundam Seed Freedom actually addressed this by having Kira second-guessing those decisions and actually having other characters calling him out for thinking of himself as someone who can single-handedly change the course of not just a battle, but even all of humanity. So Kira's godlike status went to his head, and now he actually has to deal with the consequences of this in an interesting way. How it is then plays out and how it's handled, I'll leave it to you to watch the movie. And I was also really happy to see how they handled Kigali. Her portrayal in Gundam Seed Destiny wasn't exactly favorable, let's say, but in Gundam Seed Freedom, she is back to her old self. The only downside is that she doesn't get a whole lot of screen time or even a lot of action, but this is understandable considering her role and the movie's focus on action. But for the other big Kigali fans in the audience, she did make her limited screen time count, and she does still play an important role. And because the movie then mainly focuses on Kira and Lacus, I also got this same feeling for a lot of other characters. For example, Izak and Diarca managed to play a very big role in the protection of the plants with minimal screen time. But fortunately, this did not stop them from including some cool cameos, like Shiho or Stella in a very unexpected way. Again, watch the movie and you'll see how that plays out. And of course, it was also great to see that Mayrin played an important supporting role. Like, for that alone, the movie was a success in my book. And also, less fan-favorite characters got a redemption arc in this movie. like Shin. It was very interesting to see how his previous claim to fame as being the Freedom Killer and Durandal's lapdog now kinda came back to bite him in the ass. And then yet another thing that I really liked was the sense of humor they had while writing it. We got the usual references to old series, like a G Gundam-esque fight scene with the Zagog. They called Shin an idiot in one of the most hilarious ways possible, and they also weren't afraid to poke some fun at the tropes from previous Gundam Seed series. For example, we have another ship that has to escape from Orb under the guise of, yeah, we're totally being chased out and we're not actually on their side. So again, the Orb Navy has to try to shoot them down, to which the captain remarks something to the effect of, "Don't worry, we are great at missing our targets." Again, you can really feel that the movie is made for fans of Gundam Seed. Oh, and since we're on the topic of this movie being made for fans, I saw one review that said that you can watch Gundam Seed Freedom as a standalone movie without having watched Gundam Seed or Gundam Seed Destiny. And really, I do not agree with this at all. If you have not seen Gundam Seed or Gundam Seed Destiny, saying that you can watch Gundam Seed Freedom is kind of like saying you can listen to your intrusive thoughts. Sure, nobody's going to stop you, but the end result is not going to be very desirable. And it is not just because of the fan service you're going to be missing out, but also because for all of the good things I just said, there is an equal amount of bad things. For example, the pacing. Even with prior knowledge of Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny, everything in this movie goes extremely fast. Like, I constantly had the feeling that I was watching a compilation movie of a 25 episode anime series or a full 50 episode anime series. Sure, this does also mean that there's always something going on, the action keeps going on, but there's never any time to let the consequences of those actions really sink in, even at moments when there really should have been something. Like, for example, boom, super weapon, boom, millions of people die, boom, next scene. Yeah, and meanwhile, I'm just trying to hang on for dear life, trying to follow this roller coaster, while my mind can't decide if I should be listening to the foreign language that's being spoken, or if I should be reading the foreign language in which the movie is subtitled. Again, because of this fast pacing, a lot of the events in the movie feel very superficial and almost inconsequential. I have never felt so little about so many people dying. And another result of the fast pace is that the enemies are barely developed at all, and for most of them, I have literally nothing to say. I have no idea who this is, other than that he pilots one of the Black Knight's mobile suits. And if you blink at the wrong time, you don't even see this guy. And the ones that we do know something about then aren't exactly anything to write home about either. He's an incel, she gets sent to yard, and she, if I understood the movie correctly, is a lolly grandma. Or something. Again, I experienced the movie in 2 foreign languages, so while I did understand most of the movie, I did not quite get everything. So maybe they did properly explain it in like 5 seconds or something. But another amazing character then was Agnes. Oh boy. Basically, she's what you get when you clone Flay, but you take away all of the elements that make her at least understandable. Flay does get a lot of hate in the Gundam fandom because of what she does in the series, But from a character point of view, I think she might just be one of the best and most fleshed out characters in Gundam Seed, with an absolutely amazing arc from beginning to end. She was a pampered rich girl who came face to face with the realities of war in one of the worst ways imaginable. And then she deals with this grief in one of the worst ways possible. And while I'm not going to justify the actions that she takes, at the very least, you can see where she's coming from. And in a way, it also makes her feel like the most actual human of like the entire Gundam Seed cast. Agnes, meanwhile, she's just a bitch. She had an interesting setup, but then she does a Requa and just jumps the ship to get the D. But now, let's return to the story. I already talked about this in what I liked about the movie, but now I do also have to bring it up in what I didn't like about the movie. Because while it starts out with an interesting premise, the second half of the movie becomes very cliched, and dare I say, pretty damn cringy too. It is all about the power of love, and it is about as predictable as it can get. I even got so bored that my mind started wandering and thought like, is this movie's ending part of the Japanese government's plan to get Japanese people to make more babies again? Because love conquers everything, and we do get 2 suggested sex scenes. But for the true believers of Jesus Yamato and the Holy Virgin Lacus, don't worry, it is just suggested, and they don't even kiss. But it is totally fine to have them showing up to the beach completely naked, because that is, of course, way less embarrassing than kissing. Also, remember what I said about those millions of people dying? It's also kinda jarring to have that happen and then have the ending being all about, the power of love. Macross can get away with this, but Gundam Seed Freedom is no Macross. So, if you're expecting a more serious and grounded final battle, you're going to be upset as the rest of the people were that I was with. I really should have recorded their reactions for this video. And it gets worse yet. If you weren't a fan of Kira's overkill in Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny, then boy are you in for a surprise at the final battle of Gundam Seed Freedom. Saying that it was overkill would be an understatement. What I didn't talk about yet then is the animation, which is the one thing that everyone does seem to agree on. It is really high quality, it is detailed, smooth, has no reused animation, at least not that I noticed, and the infamous fish lips of the characters didn't actually bother me all that much while watching the movie. The only thing I have to mention is the 3D used for the mobile suits. Like, yeah, they do look great, and the action is absolutely top-notch, but I still felt like it lacked a certain something compared to 2D animation. Like, no matter how good the 3D was, to me, it didn't quite have the same wow factor as something like Suletta vs. Guel from Witch from Mercury. And then the last thing then is something that I noticed that, like, isn't good or bad, but something that just kinda surprised me. In the entire movie, I did not see a single dagger L. We got 105 daggers and Windams, but for some reason, no dagger Ls anywhere in sight. So, one in-universe explanation could be that so many dagger Ls were wiped out during the Second Bloody Valentine War that they had to resort to the older 105 daggers to, like, bolster their forces. But on the flip side, don't forget that the 105 dagger actually does have certain advantages over the dagger L. one being laminated armor that offers better protection against beam attacks. So it is also possible that they deliberately chose the 105 dagger over the dagger L, and that it's now the dagger L that's kind of like shoved to the side as an obsolete backup unit. The obvious real-life explanation then, of course, is probably that like they didn't have the time or the money to make the 3D model for the thing. And, well, those were my thoughts on the Gundam Seed Freedom movie, or at the very least, my thoughts that I could tell you without getting too much into spoiler territory. I didn't think it was quite as good as the craze would lead you to believe, but in general, I did have a very enjoyable time in the movie theater. It was fine. And if they're showing it close to me with English or even Dutch subtitles, I think I'm definitely going to be watching it a second time. So if you've seen the movie, also let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments or in the poll that will be going live alongside this video. Because, like I said in the beginning, I have seen so many different opinions about this movie that I'm really curious to see how this poll is going to go. But that has been all for this video. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.